to help you. So what we do today, we do a few updates of our Fire Safe Council accomplishments. We have Forest Service and we have CAL FIRE agency representatives here. We'll ask for a short update, and then we'll introduce Dr. Eric Knapp with the talk. Afterwards, we have a collaboration of our Firewise communities, and anybody's welcome to join in. We gather in a circle and we have a more intense meeting about what's going on with Firewise. All right, I want to introduce Rob Keenan. We are privileged to have the use of this facility and the professional recording for the Fire Safe Council, and that's all thanks to Rob and KIXE.
Of several hazards here this morning. Wanted to welcome everybody to the building. I wanted to say actually thank you to the Fire Council. This has been a really great opportunity and a great partnership that we're actually able to get this information out via streaming and people can use our facility. Which is the other part here is that once again, if you have an organization, an agency, a nonprofit, and I'm open to just about anybody who has a meeting. If you want to use this space, and I know Fire Council uses this space and also our conference room. So those are available. You just have to schedule with us and figure that out. Also want to thank Eder for being a one-man juggling act here, getting all this going. He's actually doing a great job. So, so without further ado, move on to your meeting.
Okay, next, Ron, why don't you come up and highlight a few accomplishments, including, I think we were not quite sure how many Firewise communities, but we're building. I think we have 21 or 22, and yay, that's wonderful. Thanks to our staff for continuing to build these wonderful groups.
Thank you, Barb. Yeah, I just talked to Amanda, our county coordinator. She's done a great job, her and Lydia, really supporting and helping to grow and mentor the Firewise community. So we have 21 right now and 6 more in process. So, you know, we're looking definitely hit 25, maybe we can get to 30 before long. And if you get on our website and look at the map, I think it's on there where the Firewise community boundaries are. You can see where the holes are, but we're really covering a good portion of Shasta County with Firewise communities right now. So that's really exciting. For the Fire Council right now, just kind of the stuff we're doing, I'm sure, you know, we're busy like everybody else. Our first fuel break that we did out at Bullskin Ridge is in the closeout phase right now. Sierra Nevada Conservancy went out there, looked, very pleased with the project, so it was very successful, and we're just waiting for the final closeout stuff from Sierra Nevada Conservancy on that. So we're really excited about that, and we're just kicking off through one of the CAL FIRE prevention grants. We were awarded the backbone fuel break. We're getting ready, probably start work on that late summer, early fall, and take care of the at least our portion of Backbone Ridge out there. So we're excited about that. We also have a small PG&E grant, and I want to thank the old Shasta Firewise community for helping us get those right of entries out there. It's not going to be a whole lot, probably 25 acres or so out there to get done. It's a small grant, but you know it helps, you know, just get some of that fuels reduction work done. It's going to be along or near the power line out there, near the highway, so it's going to be visible. It should be a really good project, and we look at that as, you know, kind of getting our foot in the door and showing the value of getting those projects done, and hopefully larger amounts of grant funds will come in to continue finishing that work. We're also continuing our project pipeline kind of on the east side out towards Round Mountain, Montgomery Creek, and in that area. We're looking at trying to kind of tie all of those together into the North Valley fuel break that CAL FIRE is kind of made a priority of getting done. So we're looking at working with them and placing those fuel breaks in areas that will be a part of that North Valley fuel break. Not only to get that project completed, but if it's a priority, then hopefully funding can come for that to get the work actually done. It's great to get out there and plan a lot of stuff, but it's better if you can get out there and actually get the work done on the ground. We are continuing our chipping program. I encourage everybody to sign up. If you don't like burning or hauling it away yourself, chipping's a great option, so I would encourage you to get the word out to your neighbors and into your Firewise communities to go ahead and get that chipping done. We have a new chipping program manager. His name is Hal Williams. He's sitting in the back, loves public speaking, but I told him he didn't have to today, but he can raise his hand. If you have any questions about chipping, feel free to talk to Hal or just introduce yourself. He's doing a great job just picking that program up and continuing it, which kind of leads into the new grants that we applied for. One is to continue that chipping grant. So we applied for that with the CAL FIRE prevention grants, as well as a education and outreach grant for them. And we had discussions with CAL FIRE. That's the direction they would like to see us go in that. So we're taking that to heart and continuing to apply for those grants. Really, that's about all I have for our update. So I would like to turn it over. We'll start with since I used to work for the Forest Service, I'll start with the Forest Service and get Jesse to come up and give a quick update on what the Forest Service is doing here locally.
Hello, my name is Jesse Penland. I'm one of the patrols on the Shasta Lake District for the Shasta Trinity National Forest. Thankfully, I've got a very short fire update for this year. We've only had 2 small fires on the Shasta Lake District. There was a roadside start last week or the week before. We kept it to about an acre and a half, likely caused by potentially a chain dragging or some sort of a vehicle malfunction. The other one, we had an abandoned campfire out at Hers Bay, which was about 1/10 of an acre, so that was a good catch. And actually, that one was probably kept so small because it was in a fuel reduction area where we did a lot of burning and cutting. So Eric will speak a little bit to that in a little bit. We've done several CAL FIRE assists, working with Aaron and the team over there. We've got our mobilization center up and running, which is kind of a central hub for the North State for out of area and out of state resources that come in, just to kind of have them here to supplement our existing firefighting force. And we've been putting them to work on some of our fuels reduction projects, really kind of bulletproofing some of our fire lines. So this winter, when we have a good opportunity weather-wise, we'll be able to just jump right into it and get these done. Specifically, we're working on the I-5 project, the South O'Brien unit, which is about 1,000 acres, I think. So it'll be a really good one. And that's about it.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. And now Aaron from CAL FIRE.
Morning, everyone. Aaron Hathaway with CAL FIRE. Quick update on what we have going on. So I've been in this position now 5.5 years. It's been a blessing. I've seen the start of the Fire Safe Council when we were just starting to grow and become an actual council and get recognized by the Board of Supervisors as the Fire Safe Council for Shasta County, all the way to the growth of, I think when I first got in this position and started helping with the Firewise communities, I think we were between 10 and 13 communities. So it's pretty amazing to see the growth we've had a couple years, and a lot of it's been due to the Fire Safe Council and other communities like yourselves that have come here, really trying to bolster that and do like grassroots, on the ground, local work in your communities. And I can't praise that enough. I'm really excited to have the 6 new ones come on board too, and just continue to see the program grow, because I really do feel like it's a benefit to every single person in the public out there to have this program. On our stuff, yeah, so we've, thanks for the Forest Service for helping us on some of our stuff, and it's exciting to hear success stories too, and like fuels reduction helping that, right? So as a lot of you guys might know, we had the Brook Fire here in Shasta County out by Jones Valley a couple weeks back, or actually a week and a half back essentially. And same kind of success thing. So the Fire Safe Council is going to be working on Backbone Ridge Road. Well, we've been, previous to that, we have been doing some of that on our own, CAL FIRE with our fuels crew. And it became a great opportunity as that fire was burning to the north. We actually were able to stop it right there on Backbone Ridge Road. And we were able to stop it because the fuels had been lessened there. We were able to drive our vehicles into it. I don't know if anybody's ever driven that road. Like, it is not, you go back 5, 6 years ago before we started working on the project, and you know, unless you were in a side-by-side or dirt bike or a four-wheeler, you weren't riding on that road because the washouts were so deep and everything. And so our engines weren't able to access it at that point in time. But since we've done that, we were able to get all our vehicles inside there, and we were actually able to burn off that piece of line to create kind of a buffer for that fire as it ran up against it. And we were able to ultimately stop right there. So the fuels reduction work that is happening around the state and around our communities, man, the benefit of it is pretty substantial. And it's been really good for us. So in general, like that was the biggest fire we've had in the unit so far. I think that capped out around 500 acres, just a little bit like 501 or 502 or something like that. And other than that, we've been keeping them really small as well. But we've had a ton of ignitions this year. Just so you guys know, like there's been a lot more ignitions this year than we've faced in years past. So opportunity is there for growth on those too, just depending on weather conditions and patterns. So we hope we continue to stay safe through the summer and things go well. I'm really pleased to announce my new replacement. So like I said, I've been here 5.5 years. I just ended up promoting up to a different position, and it's a Sacramento-based position, but I'll be working here in Shasta County. By all means, I will still be available if you guys need help with things, but I really believe my replacement will do a fantastic job. I'm going to bring him up here real quick. Jordan Wilson is going to be my replacement on it. So I've been actually working with Jordan for the last, he ended up working on the California conservation cruise while we were here, and it was actually one of the ones that did a lot of the fuels reduction along that Backbone Ridge previous to this fire coming through. So I'm going to hand the mic over to him, and I'm going to bow out. And so, yeah. Thank you.
Well, guess I don't really know where to start. This is my first week with Aaron. I've been shadowing and trying to get my feet wet with the Fire Safe Council. This is the new territory for me where I'm like, oh, that's what those words mean. That's what Fire Safe, Firewise, all these things. So that's been a learning curve. I'm excited. Bear with me. Feel free to educate me. And if I misspeak, if I say anything like, oh, no, that's actually how this works in here. I'm in your guys' realm, in your territory. So please, as I learn it, have the patience and fill me in. But I'm very excited, very grateful to be here, and I love seeing the community engagement. I grew up down in Tuolumne County, and very similar to parts of Reading, very, very tiny, very remote. There are plenty of communities out there that are one way in, one way out, and we're always thinking about what's going to happen to those 2,000 to 3,000 people that are over here in this area. So I see a lot of similarities with that to coming up here into Shasta. And I will say Shasta has had an incredible amount of engagement, just with our volunteerism, with our different Firewise, fire safe communities. Like, it's been incredible. I came up here in 2019, 2020, and just the more I've been involved in the community, the more grateful I am to have everybody here who's stepping up and doing their part. So thank you. It definitely makes our job so much easier.
Thank you. Okay, well, unless there's any questions, I'll hand it back over to Barb, and we'll get the presentation going.
I just can't resist mentioning once again what Aaron Hathaway has done for our communities. He's just available all the time to serve. He's been out on Saturdays. He has a big family and kids, and he's just helped our Firewise communities immensely. You know, the assessment of our needs is a pretty big job for lay people, and Aaron just helps us through it. And we look forward to the change. It's a little hard to say goodbye, Aaron. So you stick with us and come say hello once in a while. All right, we're on to our presentation. Again, we are so lucky to have Dr. Eric Knapp so available to talk to us. He is a Forest Service research ecologist for the Pacific Southwest Experiment Station here in Redding. He's an eminent researcher, widely published, tremendous knowledge, and I can't say enough to thank you for giving us your time. Also, would you please hold your questions until the end? We have a question period set aside. So, Dr. Knapp.
Well, thank you, Barb. Make sure I get this. I see here a little feedback. Is that all right? Okay, yeah. Like Barb said, my name is Eric Knapp. I'm a research scientist with the U.S. Forest Service. I work here in Redding. I've been here for 22 years. And so this is a little bit of a, what I talk about today is a little bit of a side project for me. And yeah, so I'm going to talk about today about protecting your home from wildfire. And I have some co-authors on this presentation, Jana Valikovic and Steve Quarles from University of California Cooperative Extension, and then Nels Johnson, who's a statistician from our office. There we go. Yeah, so with our climate, our vegetation, and land use patterns, it makes California really prone to destructive wildfires. And we've certainly had our fair share here in the North State that have not only destroyed structures, but have cost people their lives as well, including the Camp Fire and the Car Fire right here. And so as the temperatures increase and fire season starts heating up, I think this is a great time to talk about what we can do to protect our homes. The timing is perfect. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to review mechanisms for home losses in wildfire. Then I'm going to share with you an analysis we did following the 2018 Camp Fire to think about what we can learn from homes that actually survived the fire. What we did is compared those to homes that were destroyed and figured out what was different about those homes. And with that, I'm going to, at the end, offer some recommendations for living in our fire-prone environment. So just a little overview at first. 3 types of structure fire exposures. We have direct flame contact, and that's when you have continuity of fuels from the wildlands to the home, which can bring flames up to your home. We have embers, which can travel a mile or more through the air and ignite things next to your house. The third is radiant heat, and that is when a fuel source, a big fuel source adjacent to your home, like a shed in this case, in this illustration, or a neighboring structure ignites. And the heat can be so great that even though there's no flame against your house, the radiant heat can cause damage and actually can destroy your home as well. So the educational messages that we typically focus on surround reducing direct flame contact through defensible space. We hear a lot about defensible space, but preparing for embers and radiant heat exposures requires some additional mitigations, and I'll bring that into the conversation here today too. So just a little review of the 2018 Camp Fire. And this was just a really extreme event. It started down in the Feather River Canyon, and in an hour and a half, that fire had traveled 8 miles, and by the time it hit Paradise, it was 5 miles wide. And then we you had a lot of house-to-house fire spread, and you can actually see, you can actually see the boundary of paradise right here by all the brightness. These are homes burning. But one of the things I want to point you to is all of these little spots out front of the fire. That really just shows you the role that embers play in fire spread. So what we did, we asked 3 questions. We asked, was home survival associated with fuels from nearby vegetation? Did the proximity to burning structures influence home survival? And in 2008, we had a big building code update in California, and so we wondered whether the building code update tended to increase the odds of survival. So those are the 3 things we were going for. What we did is we took the boundary of paradise and we randomly selected 400 homes for a greater study. And for each of those randomly selected homes, we put 2 circles around them. And in an interior circle of 100 meters or 98 feet, we estimated the canopy cover of overstory vegetation. We did this from satellite photos. So we didn't actually look at stuff on the ground. And then we also did the same in a 100-meter radius or 328-foot radius circle. So this are getting the broader forest cover in that area. We also, for each of those structures, we measured the distance to the nearest destroyed structure and counted the number of structures that were destroyed in that broader circle. And then we put in a bunch of other variables in the model, like slope, year of construction, and stuff like that. And so I'm just going to jump into, I just have a few pictures that show some graphs, so I wouldn't worry too much about the graphs. I know you're not going to be able to see the axes in the back, but our variable that we were interested in was the probability of home survival. And it turned out when we put all of these factors in the model, the ones that really popped out were the year the house was built, distance to nearest destroyed structure, but that varied with the time period, the total number of structures destroyed within the 328-foot radius circle, and the overstory canopy cover, both close to the house and farther away. And what we ended up doing is we divided the homes, the data into homes built before 1997, ones built after the 2008 building code update. So that's an 11-year period, and then we chose an 11-year period immediately before that, 1997 to 2007. And so we have, each of these 3 columns are for homes that were destroyed, or homes that were built at those times. And what you can see here on the x-axis is probability, or with the y-axis, probability of survival. Here's the first one is distance to nearest destroyed structure. And you can see a definite trend here where the farther you are away from a destroyed structure, the higher the probability of survival. Pretty strong relationship. Same with destroyed structures within 100 meters. If you have few structures destroyed within that bigger circle, you have a higher probability of survival. And then with the overstory tree canopy, low canopy cover, high probability of survival, high tree canopy cover, low probability of survival. So, the bottom line here is that neighboring structures on fire, surrounding vegetation, and home age all matter. And one thing we noticed is that relationship appeared to be less strong for older homes. And you might wonder, why is that? And we think it's with older homes, there's a lot of other variables that are important, like maintenance, like the fact that we tend to store more and more stuff around our houses and build sheds around our houses as they get older. And those are not things that we quantified. And so I think it overwhelmed the tree canopy cover and the distance to nearest destroyed structure. It's not that it's not important for older homes, that the canopy cover and proximity to destroyed structure. It's just that they got overwhelmed by these many other factors. So and for this question about building code, we addressed that because wouldn't it be great if we rebuilt all the houses, after these destructive events, and we could eliminate the probability of home loss just with new construction. And so we were interested in the home age question. And this graph shows the homes in Paradise in decadal periods over time. This last column is the 2008 to 2018 period. And you can see there's an increase in the probability of survival over time. And what I did is I put the damaged homes in with the undamaged homes, because damage in a lot of cases was just like a singed wall or a cracked window. The structure was essentially intact. And so for this analysis, I'm essentially looking at this bar right here versus this bar right here, the 11-year period immediately before. And it looks like there is a difference here. But when we did the statistics on it and factored in all the other variables that change over time, we didn't find that that was statistically different. And so I think it's not that the building codes didn't matter. I think there's a lot of reasons why maybe we didn't see a strong effect, because a lot of the things that were mandated in the building codes, like certain like double pane windows and certain wall coverings, were already being implemented. And it's just that the building code update just put that into law. And so it's not like home built in 2007 was dramatically different from a home built in 2008. There was a general increase in survival over time. You can see that, newer homes did better. So the last bit of some of the numbers I'm going to show you, we plugged all of this in what's called a decision tree analysis in order to determine which of these variables was most important, and to start developing some thresholds of importance. And I'll explain that a little bit. So the variable that ended up being the most important of all of them was distance to nearest destroyed structure. And we found that the number that best predicted a home that was destroyed from a home that survived was 59 feet. So if you were farther than 59 feet from a destroyed structure, you had a much greater probability of survival. And for tree canopy cover was the second most important variable. And for that one, we had a threshold of 53% canopy cover, which incidentally is a pretty high canopy cover. And if you were less than 53%, you had a higher probability of survival. And then year built, the factor that was the year that was most distinguished survived versus destroyed homes was 1973. If you're built after or in 1973, you had a higher probability of survival. And then slope, less than 8%. So if you're on flat ground, you have a higher probability of survival, and that makes sense because fire travels faster up slopes. So when we for homes that met all of those criteria in Paradise, the probability of survival was 73%. And so compare that to the background in Paradise as a whole, 10 to 15% of the homes survived. So we had a 5-time increase in survival if you met these criteria. And that gives me hope, because it suggests that home survival is predictable, and there's a lot of things that we can do to increase the odds of survival. I mean, you can't really change how far away your neighbor's house is to you, but you can certainly talk to your neighbor and encourage them to institute the same defensible space or home hardening that you're doing to prevent their home from becoming a threat to you. You can make a decision, not to install the shed next to your house. Or if you install the shed next to your house, you can make sure that it is built to the same fire-safe and ember-resistant structure than as your main house. Tree canopy cover, that's absolutely something we can do something about. Year built, that suggests that maintenance is an issue, and we can upgrade our homes. deal with problems as they arise. And slope is really the only one really can't do a whole lot about. So a lot of this is in a paper that we published in the Journal of Fire Ecology. And so if you're interested in that, you can search my name and the Journal of Fire Ecology and come up with that actual analysis. So just getting into the mechanisms a little bit now. Structure ignition in wildfires. I think there's a common perception that in a lot of cases this is a giant wall of flame coming out of the vegetation that impacts homes. And that can definitely be the case. But in a lot of instances, it's windblown embers that blow into communities and cause at least initial structure ignitions. And then after that, once structures ignite, they often become the dominant fuel. There's a lot of fuel in a home, and then you get structure-to-structure fire spread. Some vulnerable locations for ember ignition include things like complex roof patterns where you get leaves that accumulate in valleys in the roof. You can have your gutters fill with leaves, and those ignite and then get into the boards, the wood boards underneath your roof. Fence to home ignition. Embers very readily ignite dry wood fences. And you can have direct entry, in gable end vents or under eave vents if your vents aren't tight enough. So in regards to tree canopy cover, that's a little bit more of a complex story, because oftentimes what we see after these destructive events is you'll notice that some of the trees in the neighborhood will be completely intact and the home's destroyed, and where the trees are most damaged tends to be around the homes. And so what that suggests to me is that it's not the vegetation that caught fire that impacted the homes. In a lot of cases, it was the home that caught fire and then impacted the vegetation, which then can generate more embers and transmit that to the next home. So one thing we have to consider is that live vegetation contains abundant moisture. It's a lot of cases half water. And so embers, what they're igniting is not the live trees, but they're igniting the stuff on the ground underneath the live vegetation. And so oftentimes embers are igniting leaf litter on gutters, on roofs, in and around the home, and the dead and downed wood, especially rotten wood, bark mulch, things like that. So it's in a lot of cases, the trees are often more of a maintenance issue than a tree issue. If you clean up the leaf litter and other fuels underneath the tree, you prune the lower branches, put in gutter guards, you can eliminate or mitigate a lot of that threat that trees pose. So the reason I say that is I'm a real big fan of trees, and that's one reason I work for the Forest Service. I like trees. And I see the value of having trees in our landscape, and especially in a hot place like Reading. They provide shade, they provide habitat, and so I think it's important to understand that there are ways to mitigate the tree effect. It's just the more trees you have on your property, the more work you're going to have to do in order to do the maintenance to make sure they don't become a fire hazard. But they don't have to be a fire hazard. So one of the things I did for this paper too is I took all of the pictures that CAL FIRE takes in their damage inspections after big events like this in order to generate some information about where was the entry point of fire to the home, what's the cause of fire damage, and what's the damage location. And one thing we saw with when we compiled all the pictures from the damaged homes, you can't really get much information from the destroyed homes because that information is then lost. What we saw is that radiant heat was overwhelmingly the greatest cause of home damage. Next was flame, but indirect ember ignition. Flame embers ignited something adjacent to the house, and the flames from that ignition then affected the house. Or we had also flame where we had continuity with the wildland. And we had direct ember ignition was lower down on the list. Embers, if they directly ignite your house, it's usually something rotten, some rotten wood on your house. But it's often what they ignite is something else, some fine fuel that then catches your house on fire. And so as far as damage location, with radiant heat being the main cause, exterior walls and windows were the most common area where we saw damage. But we also saw damage to roof, eaves, and gutters, attached fencing, and decks and other things were a little lower down the list. But just going through a few structures, here's a house that you could see that the walls, the siding has been peeled back, so that's a pretty obvious sign of radiant heat damage. But we also saw a sign here of indirect ember ignition. It looks like there was a bunch of leaves and litter that accumulated on this flat roof, and that caught on fire. For this house right here, you see the blackened wall, broken out window, the window's lying on the ground here. What that does, the window is the most vulnerable part on a wall. So radiant heat probably caused that damage. That can allow embers to get into the structure and ignite the interior of your structure. In this house, I don't know if you can see that on the back, but you can see the gutter right here is blackened, and so that's a sign of the contents of a gutter caught fire. In this house right here, we had an indirect ember ignition, probably bark mulch right next to the wall underneath the vegetation. The embers ignited that then dried out the vegetation above it and involved the planted vegetation. And just a few more, because I just think these are so illustrative of things we can do to change the outcome. In this particular situation, we had a wood fence that burned up and then ignited the underside of these eaves. We also had looks like a direct ember ignition right here in this wood. This house right here had a near home vegetation to the eave, and that's a really dense juniper planted next to a house. Probably not a great plant to have next to a house. This is a common case right here where probably bark mulch that burned and ignited by an ember and then got into the corner of the house. And in this particular case, we had embers ignited something that the homeowner had stored next to their house, which then got into the roof. Luckily, in all these cases, the home was not impacted. And it's not to say that the entry point for homes that were destroyed are the same, but I think it does give you an idea of some of the ways that embers do get into houses. So I'm just going to share a picture that Jana Valikovic took here after the car fire. And this is a home west of Reading with this homeowner. All 17 of their neighbors' homes were destroyed by the fire, but this home survived. So we went out there to take a look at what made this house different. And one of the things you note in this picture is that there's really no combustibles next to the house. You have a tree near the home, but it's nicely limbed up. The litter has been cleaned up. You have vegetation near the house, but there's succulents. And then this manzanita here, it could, a manzanita out in the wildlands can produce some pretty good flame lengths, but here they've limbed it up nicely, so there's really no way for that manzanita to become a fuel. And so it's pretty clear that they did what they needed to do to prevent embers from igniting their house. So I'm just going to now finish by with some take-home points. So to avoid direct flame contact to your house, obviously we can do surface fuel management in surrounding wildlands so that fire doesn't spread into neighborhoods. And that's one key. And I see that, you know, from earlier discussions, the fire safe councils are doing a lot of that work. Good defensible space is important. Also, not having bark mulch wicks or wood fence wicks to the house. So anything that can create fuel continuity to the home. For embers, the key here is to remove near-home fuels, and that includes bark mulch, leaf litter, stored objects. If you have bark mulch up to your house, I mean, the key is to get that bark mulch back a bit from the house, replace that with rock. Clean out the gutters, ember-proof vents. I mean, these are all things to prevent ember ignition. And a lot of that is going to be addressed when California is in the process of implementing this Zone Zero idea of having a 0 to 5 foot zone around your house that does not have any combustible material. And I think that will go a long way to preventing these sort of dangers. As far as radiant heat goes, it's important to apply the same fire safe principles to sheds and other outbuildings as you would your home. And you know, one of the things is that we saw in our analysis that the critical distance was 59 feet to a destroyed structure. If you're closer than that, you had a higher probability of your home being destroyed. In a lot of neighborhoods, homes are closer together than that. So it really speaks to the importance of talking to your neighbors and doing fuel reduction as a neighborhood, home hardening as a neighborhood event, not just, you know, individually. You can do everything you want in your house, and if your neighbor does not, it can still impact your home. And so we can't always, you know, that's something that we can't always avoid, but there are certain things I think you still can do. And for surfaces in close proximity to neighbors, some things you could do is put tempered glass in both window panes and a double pane window. Put in window shutters, actual working window shutters, you know, non-combustible ones that when you evacuate, you can close the window, because that's the most vulnerable part of your wall. You know, a lot of folks focus on the siding of the wall. That's important too, but the window is the most vulnerable part. And yeah, obviously, yeah, non-combustible siding is still important because that can catch fire as well. So I'm going to conclude here with just a few pictures that I took on the 3-year anniversary of the campfire. And this gives me hope as well, because you can see some of the lessons that we've learned over time. Here's a case where there's a wood fence around this house, but the last 5 feet underneath the eaves, they replaced it with a metal gate. Great. And there's a lot of rock in the front yard. And that's probably a little overboard. You don't need to put that much rock, but you know, just the most critical part is around your house, so you don't create a wick of fuel towards your house. Here's a house that has a fence composed of metal rather than wood. And then there was a lot of installation of fire-resistant vents in the reconstruction. And what I'd want to do is just the last point here is to give a shout out to Celeste Abbott, one of my employees who is now retired, who did a lot of the data wrangling for me for this analysis, Zeke Lunder with Deer Creek Resources, and CAL FIRE for providing the data, the damage inspection data, and especially Nick Wallingford here with CAL FIRE, who was really helpful in conversations with me. So with that, I'm going to conclude, and we'll open it up for questions. For our study, we did not get that fine scale because we based our analysis on satellite photos, and so we don't know what homes had enclosed eaves versus not. We know that works from a lot of studies that have been done on homes in controlled settings, but simply replacing the vents with mesh, fine enough mesh. I think they recommend like 1/8 inch or less mesh these days. That should prevent most of the embers that are big enough that can actually ignite something in your attic from getting hold. We did, and when we did our statistics, we put all of those factors in the model. But really our proxy for vegetation was tree canopy cover, which increases over time. We know that there's also a lot of, better developed planted vegetation that the homeowner might plant so there's a lot of confounding factors, and that makes any analysis like that difficult. And I think that's maybe one reason why we didn't see an effect of the 2008 building code update too, because newer homes, they start with a scraped ground, and they also had less tree canopy then. And so there's a lot of confounding factors that are difficult to completely take out. Yeah, I'll go in the back and then you in the front here. I am actually, that's a possibility, but when you see pictures, and I think a lot of pictures of ember storms are becoming available now, where people can get a sense of just how many embers there are. It doesn't take many embers to ignite something that is like dry next to your house. So even if you knock down some embers, I think there's just so many embers in these destructive events that's probably not a factor. And in terms of like green vegetation, embers don't ignite green vegetation. It's the stuff, it's the dry stuff that they ignite. And also, in a lot of cases, when fire moves from crown to crown in a canopy, that is usually driven by the heat of a surface fire. It's some other fuel on the ground that is driving heat up into the canopy. It dries out the green vegetation, removes the water, and then that can become fuel. So it's very rare that we see fire moving from crown to crown independently of a hot surface fire. So it's oftentimes stuff on the ground. In a lot of cases, I took some pictures in that neighborhood after the fire went through too, and it's kind of the way we used to design landscapes, is put these dense shrubs around our homes, and those are very hard to clean under. And so I think what people forget is the embers are igniting the leaves and the stuff underneath those shrubs, and then that involves the shrubs, and then that gets into the eaves. in terms of windows, I believe a lot of the modern dual pane windows have one tempered glass pane and then the other one's not. And with the tempered glass, if it cracks, at least it stays intact. And so, but thought is by having both of them tempered, then you have a even greater barrier. One thing I noticed from a lot of the pictures after the campfire is that we have a lot of these vinyl windows, and sometimes that vinyl has a low melting point. It melts, and then the pane of the window will fall out. So. Well, I wish I had Yana here to, maybe you can speak to that. That would be great. Thanks. Hey, Barbara. Well, a defensible space doesn't necessarily prevent the home from being ignited by embers if you have stuff around your house. Well, one thing I have to be clear of, 59 feet was, there's a whole gradient. 59 feet was just the point at which our statistical model best predicted the difference between them. I think there's a whole range. You can have a house 100 feet away that's on fire that can still impact your house. They throw a lot of embers as well. There's still a lot of heat from that. And I also saw situations where homes that were closer than 59 feet from a burning structure survived. So it's not black and white. But it does line up to a lot of the studies done by Insurance Institute for Home Business and Safety, where they've found, that at what point from a burning structure does radiant heat become so high that you can actually ignite the siding, and that 59 feet lines up pretty well with theirs. I think they found something like 45 feet is maybe a critical distance, so it's somewhere in that range. Well, it does. I mean, if you can imagine, there's some pretty good flames that come off of a wood fence, and the problem is that if it's right underneath your eaves, that can get into your eaves. And so, if you prevent that by backing your wood fence off from the house, yeah, it does prevent that. I saw a lot of structures after Paradise that were wood fence into stucco siding, but then maybe you had a window on that wall too, and then the burning fence could then crack the window and cause flames to enter the house that way, even if the stucco prevented the structure from catching fire. I can't really answer. I mean, obviously, we didn't address that in our study, but what I've heard from talking with folks in the fire service is that, you know, it takes a fair amount of energy to ignite a propane tank. They do go. I've heard stories of them going off, but you have just keep big, heavy fuels away from your propane tank. But like a little grass fire burning towards your propane tank is probably not enough energy to cause a problem. So it's just the level of heat next to your propane tank.
Thank you, brother. You mentioned the Zone 0 rules that the Board of Forestry has been struggling with, and I guess I wonder if have you followed that at all, and have any thoughts about how that's playing out?
I have followed it. I'm quite interested in it, and I feel like, you know, just looking at just fire physics and the way fires burn in these systems, I think having a non-combustible zone would make a lot of sense. But I think where they've gotten into trouble with some of the public is just the strict mandate, you know, A and B, or not really factoring in that you can mitigate the effect of a tree, for example, next to your home by doing other things. And I think they're trying to adapt to that and make it a little less black and white. But ultimately, you know, I think in terms of protecting our homes, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, that's something we've talked about in conversation is I think there's, in the past, as foresters, we tended to cut down the oaks sometimes in favor of the conifers, but in terms of, you know, if you have to have a crown fire, you have to have enough, like what called canopy bulk density, and a dense conifer crown is more likely to engage in crown fire than a more of an open canopy black oak. And so personally, like I do a lot of work in mixed conifer systems, and we're thinking more and more about the role that variety plays in these systems. And I really like when I have black oaks kind of mixed in with conifers in my forest, because you create some fuel discontinuity too. You know, you break up the fuel. So if you get fire into the canopy in a conifer section, then it encounters a little patch of black oaks, goes to the ground. Having that variety, I think, is important. And yeah, personally, I think black oaks make a great tree to have around. No, I didn't get involved in any of that, but Jana spent some time down after the Palisade and the Eaton fires, and a lot of the same factors came into play down there that we saw here. So, you know, things like bark mulch and adjacent to homes, a lot of near home vegetation, a lot of house-to-house fire spread, same kind of stuff. But Jana may be proceeding down those lines still, but most of my work is actually in forestry and fuel reduction. I do a lot of work with prescribed fire and looking at whether our treatments actually work when encountered by wildfire. Do thinning and prescribed fire treatments, how do they actually perform? That's sort of the bulk of my research. I mean, this was kind of a side project born out of just living through the car fire. and campfires here in the North State. I had 4 friends and colleagues lost their homes in the car fire and really wanted to understand why. And I wasn't seeing other people really address it in a scientific way. So I was like, well, we have data. Let's see what we can learn. There is a study out of, I believe it was out of University of Nevada, Reno. There was a fire meteorologist did some work on that. And I actually was down there in the, I guess this Lake Redding area when that event happened. I was helping a friend evacuate. And one thing I noticed is that there was wind moving up the Sacramento River at the same time the fire was moving down from Whiskeytown from the northwest direction. So it sort of created this rotation. You had wind coming from the south, fire coming from this way. And then the fire crossed the Sacramento River, and you add the energy of it going uphill now. And so in combat, those events kind of came together. In a lot of ways, this paper referred to it as, you know, that convergence zone we tend to get in the winter where it creates thunderstorms? It's kind of the same thing as we have this convergence zone along the Sacramento River that caused that spin up and instability. Yeah. Yeah, ultimately it's driven by the heat energy of fuels. Yeah. Well, in Southern California, they also deal with another thing is that they're living in a chaparral landscape. I mean, I realize we have the same thing down out of Swayze and stuff, a lot of Manzanita, but the chaparral ecosystems, those are adapted to and evolved with, you know, high intensity crown fires. And those are the kind of fires that produce lots of embers. And that's just that's the natural vegetation in that landscape. And so if you live in that landscape, you know, you have to be prepared for an ember storm and do what you can to prevent your house from being ignited by embers. Yeah, that is typical, because you can imagine ember being transmitting through the air. It hits your wall, drops to the ground, and so it's usually going to ignite something on the ground. And also, an ember is a very small piece of material. It doesn't have a whole lot of heat energy to it, and so it's most likely to ignite something that's called a fine fuel, you know, like a blade of grass or a pine needle. Or something like that, you know. So, like, if you have, one of the things I noticed after the car and campfires is there was a fair number of decks I saw in homes that survived. And, you know, a well-maintained deck without rotten boards, a lot of those, you know, a fresh 2x6 is going to have a hard time being ignited by an ember. But if it's rotten, you know, much more likely. And oftentimes what happens actually is the ember will ignite leaves that have accumulated in between your deck boards and then ignite, and then catch the wood on fire. So it's again, a maintenance issue.
If there's nothing on it, there's no leaves,
Yeah.
you know, and the gutters don't fill up. I don't know how gutters would fill up with ember, and they're clean,
Yeah.
nothing on the roof. What is really the age of the roof?
Well, a lot of the roofs these days are, you know, what they call Class A fire-resistant roofs. You know, an asphalt shingle roof has a good fire resistance. You know, so it's really what the danger is in fire. You know, just igniting the contents of your gutter and getting into the sheeting underneath. And I actually saw in the car fire examples of saw one house where they had a metal roof on, but fire started in the gutter and burned into the sheeting underneath the metal roof. Yeah, I mean that. If the roof is clean, yeah, that's not necessarily the threat from embers. But now, if you have a bunch of material that collects in the valley of your roof, now that can provide enough heat energy that it could transmit through your roof. Yeah. Well.
One last thing that relates to this before we take our break. We have all of what Eric Knapp covered has to do with why the county recently enacted the ordinance for defensible space. Would Alan or Aaron, would you just quickly cover what the ordinance is about? Because this is not just optional in this county now. A lot of the things that are, so I think that would top off this conversation pretty well.
Yeah, so the new defensible space ordinance for Shasta County, we've been through a couple iterations, but I really like the iteration we have right now. I think it's going to be something that's going to be super beneficial. And a lot to speaking with what Eric was saying to our neighbors and stuff, right? If we do larger scale treatments where we incorporate multiple properties side by side, I think the benefit is going to be huge as far as structural loss, and hopefully that will in turn help with benefit of insurances coming down a little bit. But so the new county ordinance, some of the changes that have taken place is if you own a property now that is 2 acres in size or less, the expectation is that you are going to treat that whole 2 acres to a Zone 2 treatment. So if we look at our defensible space laws for the state of California, Zone 2 treatment would be essentially 4-inch or less on any of our annual grasses. It would include getting rid of ladder fuels underneath our conifers and some of our other trees. It talks about spacing of our different patches of fuel right along our property. And so that's the expectation on a 2 acres or less, is that we actually treat it to that Zone 2 standard of the defensible space. I like the idea of this because you're taking fire as a potential of, I've talked a lot in the past of flame lengths. Pretty much you can expect flame lengths 3 times the height of whatever fuel you're dealing with, right? So if we can take those annual grasses, and this year, man, some of the annual grasses are, you know, taller than I am. I know that's not very impressive, but, you know, yeah, to some, yes. So, you know, if you think about 5-foot tall grass, you could be having 15-foot flame lengths off of that. Now we reverse that and we bring that down to 4 inches. What a benefit to those and our neighbors around us and to our own properties as well. So it's going to be a pretty heavy lift. I mean, it's going to take time. We're really working with the landowners. And the main priority for CAL FIRE at this stage and for the county, our county fire marshal, which is our unit chief, is really not so hard on heavy on the enforcement of it yet. I mean, we're still doing that. We're trying to hold people to a standard, but we want progress, right? And so we understand that this could take a lot of time. That it could be, you know, you go up to some of our brush components. We talked about Swayze. You talked about Swayze, or up like if you're going up Highway 44 and you're kind of in that Dersh belt area where it's nothing but heavy brush oak and manzanita. It would be taking out large portions of that and just leaving clumps, essentially, of it, right? To get rid of that consistent fuel bed. And so we realize it's going to take a long time on a lot of properties, and we're just here to work with you guys on that. The second portion to it is if you own a property that is 10 acres or less, at that point in time, the expectation would be that you would do a 30-foot perimeter around your 10 acres. So it's no longer asking you to do the same regulations as a two-acre parcel, right? It's asking you to do a kind of a fire perimeter, and that will help because as we start fires on our own property through mowing or being negligent, or maybe we have an escape debris burn pile or something like that, the hope is that that'll help us stop that progression onto the neighbor's property. It does a couple things. First off, if the fire doesn't leave your property, typically we're pretty gracious about coming out and fighting that fire and not leaving you with a bill. That's when a lot of that changes too, and you can actually be hit with a bill from CAL FIRE after that. And so it's beneficial in that way, financially wise as well. So the other caveat to it as well on that 10 acre or less parcel, and this would actually include larger parcels too, but specifically on that, is to create defensible space for our neighbors. So let's say Barbara and my properties are right next to one another. Mine's at 10 acres, hers is at 10 acres as well. And I chose to build my house 30 feet, even though I have 10 acres, I built my house 30 feet from her property line, right? I legally cannot go onto her property and do my full 100-foot defensible space. So the county ordinance says essentially that Barbara can either allow me to come on and do it, or she is on the hook for continuing my defensible space to that 100-foot realm. Barbara, and I'll be like, hey, Barbara, let me take care of this. You mind if I work on your property? And then she'd probably say no. Like, no, like, you're fine with it. Yeah, yeah. So those are kind of the big 3 changes that have taken place on the new county defensible space ordinance. And just like any other ordinance, the way it can go is, and how this came about is you can always go stiffer with laws on county. So the defensible space or the LE 100 law still has to be met on all these county ordinances. You still have to hold that same standard for that 100 feet around your house, but the county ordinance. Anything I missed on that? Yeah.
On that 2 acres, most of those lots probably
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's
Yep. Nope. So you're responsible for the whole 2 acres. Yeah. Well, one of your weird caveats for you is you actually are in the city of Reading, and this is a county ordinance. It does not apply to this city. Yeah, good question. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Even under 2 acres, we're asking people to do it. So it's all properties all the way up. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Up to 2 acres. So they should, at a quarter acre, that whole lot should be that zone 2. Which would include, that would be the defensible space for that lot, your neighbor already as it sits. Yeah, right behind you. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. And that's the thing right now. We're working through that. We don't have a date like right on hand, but I can tell you our experience so far, right? We've been doing this now for the last 6 months essentially. And our experience so far is that the work is getting done pretty frequently, right? Like if, let's say if we have 90 of these properties or 100 of these properties, I would say within the first 3 months, like 80% of them have been meeting that standard, which is pretty phenomenal. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Mhm. I agree. They will. Yeah. Yeah. And it speaks to a little bit of what Dr. Knapp was saying as well, right? Still, our first priority, if they have a 2 acre lot and their own 100 feet is not done around their house, what do you think our first priority is going to be? The 100 feet around their house. We're going to work with that landowner first to get that first 100 feet for their structural survivability. Now, let's say the Barbara and I property lays in hand at this too. The next thing would be to get Barbara's or my extra 100 feet done, right? And then start working out from there. And so we are trying to use a systematic approach that makes sense, that like helps enforce the law, but also is just teaching and making it safer for communities rather than, hey man, just coming down and making it happen. Because eventually it's going to get that route, but with it being a new law, a lot of it is just teaching people as well, because a lot of people are not aware of the ordinance. Yeah. Yes, yes. So Western Shasta RCD has received a grant to help with this. And I know they have put in for another grant as this one runs out to continue this process. But it applies to people who do not have the financial means or the physical means to do some of this work around their property. At this point, it is only dealing with the county ordinance. So it is not helping landowners with their 0 to 100 feet. It would only be the extra after that 100 to the 2 acre lot line or the 30 feet around your 10 acre property. Okay, so that's where it's sitting right now. In order to qualify for that, I do not know all the specifications, but I do know some of them. And some of the specifications are you have had to have had a failed inspection from us, right? So you have to have a failed inspection from one of our inspectors, 4291 inspectors. We have, that grant also came with more funding for more inspectors for us. And so in the past, so we could be as many as 13 employees going around doing these inspections, which helps because these county ordinances take a lot more time than just doing a defensible space around a 100-foot structure. Always, always. So we knock doors every single time. We don't just do drive-by surveys is what I like to call them. Yeah, I try not to do drive-by surveys. Yeah, but let's say a lot of the time maybe that member's not home, right? Really, the only thing we can do at that point in time, because the Fourth Amendment, is we have the right to go up to their front door, essentially. So we won't be looking around the backside of your guys' property if you're not home. We won't be doing anything that all my inspectors know that rule and law. And so it might be a, hey, you know what, you need to reach out and contact us so you can be there and we can walk you through this process. Yeah. But typically, if the front yard's bad, the backyard's bad, and you can kind of, I mean, let's be honest, you get a pretty good idea of what you're walking into as you're walking in to the front door. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know who you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. They own the property until it's resolved. And so that could be because of a couple reasons. We try to, when we talk with the landowner there, we try to say, hey, how long do you think it's going to take you to get A, B, C done? And so maybe that landowner told us, hey, it's going to be 3 months before I think I can get this done. And so we won't even do a reinspect date until that 3-month hits, because we're trying to give that landowner the opportunity, their best opportunity to make it happen. And so it could be a situation like that. I can't speak to the specific property you're talking about. Oh, yes. If I have an address, I can tell you exactly who did the inspection. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And there's multiple ways you can ask and request one. You can call directly to CAL FIRE and it'll be routed to me or to the person that's in charge of the inspectors. Or you can go to the Western Shasta RCD on the website. They have a sign up page on there too, asking for it. And then same with a company called Blue Flamingo, which is one of the partners that are working with us for advertising. They can, all those sites, you can go on there and do it, just the email request as well. And you should get a call within a week or two from us. Yeah, good questions. Yeah. Yeah, if the homeowner's home, we do have a LE 100 sheet, and we are in the process, and it's not 100% drafted yet, of actual a county ordinance sheet too, showing all the check boxes that we look for, and it will, they will give that to you, and it says you pass essentially on it. Yep. And that becomes important, like if you're going to go sell your house, there's another bill out there called Assembly Bill 38, which is real estate inspections. Yeah, and insurance. It helps with some, it doesn't with others. You know, insurance can have a higher standard than we do. Like they're already enforcing the zone zero, which because it's not law yet, it's still sitting at the Board of Forestry's desk. We can't enforce that. We've been teaching it very strongly, but we are not enforcing it until it becomes a law. So, yeah. Oh man, we frown so much. I'm joking. You know, it just depends. Mm, yeah, 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 for sure. And that's where the county ordinance could apply, and we could have them go in and do that. Or if you guys are willing and they're willing for you to go onto their property and help clear that defensible speed, that's something that's possible. As far as, yeah, walls tend to be, now, it kind of goes to, one of the things I really like, and I try to hire with my inspectors, I try to hire people that have fire experience. The reason I like that is because when you're out there fighting these fires, you see a lot of common denominators, right? You see how fire is moving through the landscape. You see what type of vegetation poses threat. You see what type of, you know, different land features change things. And because of that, I like having inspectors who are familiar with fire and have been in it, so that way they can look at the landscape. Maybe in a situation like yours, it's not a big deal, and you could have that that brush amends, you need a patch there. And those inspectors, I trust the inspectors enough that when they come out and do that inspection and they've looked at your property, that I'm gonna back them on what their decision was on that. And maybe some people will allow it and some others might not. So